BBC One, Mari Ashby has more surprising stories from where you live. It's Inside Out.
Also tonight, actor Robert Lindsay goes back to his Ilkeston roots.
I was employed by Stanton to clean out the sewers. I was shoveling
Walk down almost any street in the UK and you'll walk past a small piece of our next story. Look carefully and you'll see the name Stanton and Staveley on lampposts and drain covers. They were made at the Ilkeston Iron Works, which in its heyday employed 7,000 people. Among them was actor Robert Lindsay, who takes up the tale of some recently uncovered film of the works.
I moved away from Ilkeston over 40 years ago, but I still come back regularly to see my dad and meet old friends.
Very good. What the hell do you think you are?
Yeah.
Hey, excuse me, is the kettle on?
No, but I can soon get it on.
Recently, I was in Ilkeston to film Who Do You Think You Are? It was a chance to learn more about my family tree and perhaps to remember, well, possibly the worst job I've ever had, working at the Stanton Iron Works.
I was employed by Stanton to clean out the sewers. I was shoveling I went down a sewer, a manhole, and at the bottom was and you shoveled it out in a bucket, and a guy pulled it up in a bucket, and he emptied it, and he stayed down there until it was empty. But it was a summer job, and it was horrendous.
Stanton Iron Works dates back to the mid-1800s, and for generations of Ilkeston people, including my grandfather Jesse, Stanton provided work. They forged pipes and lampposts in peacetime, bombs and air raid shelters in wartime, and they also made friendships that lasted decades.
This is called the shell shop, and it's called that because it was specially built in the First World War for actually making shells for the Western Front.
Oh, really?
Jesse would make shells in here, be a fettler helping to make the shells.
A fettler?
A fettler. A fettler is a man that cleans up all the castings after they've been cast.
I can't tell you, when I worked here in the 60s and that foundry door opened, the noise, the sense of danger.
Most people worked at least 52 years.
Yeah.
My dad and his 6 brothers all did 52 years at the ironworks. You're born within the shadows of the furnaces. You're born with iron in your blood.
I started work at 1950, I was 15, which was normal in those days. My dad started work in 1916 at the age of 13. And I've spoken to people who left work before my dad, and they started work at 13 and did a man's job the day it started work. It was so hard, it was unbelievable, it was physical. It wasn't mental, it was physical.
Many of the workers lived in the shadow of Stanton in nearby Crompton Street, including my granddad Jesse and Danny Cornsd.
Crompton Street was the main area, and they were the company houses. They were built by Stanton. The people came from the Blackburn to live in the houses. This is Kingston Avenue, and this was built roughly in the 1880s, 1890s.
Danny Cornsd worked at the ironworks for about 20 years. When the smelting finally stopped, he thought that all that would remain would be memories. But then, following a long-needed clear-out at the Erewash Museum, the museum's curator made a remarkable discovery.
We found approximately 70 rolls of film, thereabouts. The date range probably comes from, well, certainly 1943, which is the bomb plant production film, right through to the end of the 60s, covering just about every aspect of what Stanton did during those years at his height.
The newly discovered Cine film provides a glimpse of Stanton's key role during the Second World War, when the plant was turned over to making bomb casings, gun barrels, and air raid shelters. Harold Goff had joined the army, but was brought back to Stanton because of his foundry skills.
Me and my friend, we was the first to make the 2 first bombs. It was very hard. Today, I I don't think you have any comparison with what it was in them days. You know, they're not asking questions, you're told to do it and that's it.
With so many men away fighting, the War Office called on the women in and around Ilkeston to fill the gaps. In fact, 40% of the workforce were women.
Buses used to bring the girls in from round about Mansfield and all over different shifts, and they were drafted there by the government, and they was helping making the core bars, making the cores.
It was absolutely state of the art. It was the most modern bomb-making plant of its type in the world. In fact, some of the people we've spoken to who worked there have mentioned that everything was precisely timed. The whole production line was timed by stopwatch.
Amazingly, Stephen believes it was because the plant was so ahead of its time that Ilkeston escaped the worst of the bombings.
During my research into the history of the bomb plant, it turned out that one of the companies involved was an American company. When I did further research, this same American company, 3 years earlier in 1937, had helped the Germans modernise their steel plants in the Ruhr. You'd have thought that it would have been Blitz because it was one of the biggest bomb production plants in Britain during the war. We've spoken to quite a number of the workers who worked there, and two people, both independent of each other, did suggest that because it was such an up-to-date bomb production plant, the Germans wanted it for themselves and therefore didn't target it.
After the war, Stanton went from strength to strength, and by the time I worked there in the late 1960s, it was the UK's biggest supplier of iron products.
On similar sites throughout the country, new pipelines are being laid with speed and efficiency.
At its peak after the Second World War, there was roughly 11,000 people employed on this particular site. That was at its height. A great place to save your time.
Going off to RADA marked a new beginning for me, but the beginning of the end for Stanton came when Britain joined the common market. Iron production went abroad. Imports flooded in, the company found it hard to compete. And, ironically, it was eventually taken over by the French.
Britain was on a 3- and 4-day week. Stanton had its problems during the 1970s, and then eventually, after that, Saint-Gobain took over, and it was a big pipe producer until 2 or 3 years ago when things changed again, politically probably, and everything went back to Europe.
Nowadays, Saint-Gobain is still a thriving company, but they're not making pipes anymore. It's the end of an era in Ilkeston.
On a personal level, it's very sad, because then I start to think of these people that's devoted their life to Stanton. I don't know what they'd think if they came back today and walked down Crompton Street, or had a look at what I'm looking at today, really.
My memories of Stanton will never fade. How can they, when so many members of my family worked there, indeed, gave their lives to Stanton Iron Works? But now, thanks to Danny and Stephen, this remarkable chapter of industrial history will be preserved in the community memory too. The films will be the centrepiece of a new Stanton exhibition at Erewash Museum, a chance for people to see for themselves just what a giant Stanton once was.